If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who believes in unexpected love. And if you want more heartfelt age gap romance stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. The rain had been falling for hours that night, steady and relentless, drumming against the windows of my small apartment. It was the kind of storm that seemed to silence everything else. The streets empty, the world hushed under the weight of water and thunder. I had resigned myself to a quiet evening alone when I heard it, a soft, hurried knock at the door. At first, I thought I had imagined it. But then it came again, urgent this time. When I opened the door, she was standing there, my neighbor. Her coat was soaked through, clinging to her frame, her hair plastered against her cheeks, and her eyes wide with a mixture of apology and relief. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the sound of the storm raging behind her, droplets sliding from her hair onto the floor. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice almost drowned by the rain. The power went out at my place. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside quickly, and she entered, bringing with her the damp chill of the storm. The scent of rain and wet earth clung to her, mingling with the faint perfume she must have put on earlier that evening. I grabbed a towel from the hallway and handed it to her, watching as she pressed it gently to her face, then wrapped it around her shoulders. She shivered slightly, and I felt an unexpected tug at my chest, an urge to make her comfortable, to shield her from the storm. I told her to wait a moment while I went to fetch one of my spare sweaters. When I handed it to her, she gave me a look that lingered longer than a thank you, as though the gesture meant more than just warmth. As she slipped into the sweater, I noticed how it hung loosely on her frame, sleeves falling past her wrists. She laughed quietly at the sight, a soft, almost embarrassed sound that filled the silence between us. That laugh, gentle and unguarded, was the first crack in the tension of the evening. We moved into the living room. I made tea, and while the kettle hummed, I found myself stealing glances at her. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, hair still damp, looking both elegant and fragile at once. It struck me then how unusual it was to see her like this. Usually, when I crossed paths with her, she carried herself with effortless composure, polished, untouchable. But tonight, the storm had stripped some of that away. She was simply human, vulnerable, sitting in my home. I set the steaming mug before her, and when our hands brushed in the exchange, I felt the faintest spark, small, fleeting, but impossible to ignore. The rain outside pounded harder, filling the room with its steady rhythm. But inside, it was quiet, too quiet. And in that stillness, I knew this night was already different from any other. The storm outside seemed determined to make itself known, its rhythm steady and insistent against the windows. Inside, though, the atmosphere felt suspended, as if the world had narrowed to the two of us in my living room. She sat curled slightly forward on the edge of the sofa, one of my oversized sweaters draped around her shoulders. Her damp hair framed her face, strands catching the glow of the lamp that lit the room in a soft, amber hue. She held the mug of tea carefully, both hands wrapped around it, drawing warmth from the steam that rose and curled between us. At first, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, exactly, but it was charged, like something unspoken hung in the air between us. The kind of silence that begged to be filled, yet neither of us rushed to fill it. I listened to the faint sound of the kettle cooling in the kitchen, the patter of rain against the glass, and her quiet breaths as she shifted slightly, settling into the cushions. Then, unexpectedly, a small laugh slipped from her lips. It wasn't loud, more like a release of tension, as if she was letting herself breathe after holding it in too long. "This must look ridiculous," she said softly, glancing down at herself. "Showing up at your door in the middle of a storm, drowning in your sweater like a lost child." Her smile was self-conscious, but there was something tender in it too, something that made the corners of my own mouth lift in response. "You don't look ridiculous," I answered, my voice lower than I intended. "You look like you belong here." The words surprised me even as I said them, but I didn't take them back. She didn't laugh them off either. Instead, she looked at me for a long moment, her eyes thoughtful, as if she were trying to understand what I meant beneath the surface. The silence returned, but now it felt different, softer, warmer. I noticed how she shifted slightly closer, her knee brushing mine, not by accident, but not deliberately either. Just a subtle movement, small enough to be excused, but noticeable enough that my chest tightened at the contact. Her perfume, faint and floral, mixed with the scent of rain still clinging to her skin, reached me in waves whenever she leaned forward. It wasn't overwhelming. It was subtle, the kind of scent that makes you want to lean closer just to catch it again. We didn't rush into words. Instead, we let the quiet carry us, sipping tea, listening to the storm, occasionally meeting each other's eyes, and then looking away just as quickly. The pauses grew longer, the glances lingered more. And then she sighed, softly, as if releasing something she'd been holding in. It's been a long time since I've felt safe like this. Her words were quiet, almost lost in the sound of the rain, but I heard them. And I knew in that moment that this storm had given me more than an unexpected visitor. It had given me a glimpse into a part of her no one else had seen. The storm outside showed no sign of ending. The rain drummed steadily on the roof, wind pressing against the windows, as if the world beyond my walls had been swept away, and all that remained was this quiet cocoon of light and warmth. She leaned back now, the oversized sweater falling comfortably against her frame, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her mug. Her eyes softened as she glanced at the window, watching the blur of water streaming down the glass. There was a stillness about her that made me hesitate to speak, but then she turned back to me, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You know," she began slowly, "storms always remind me of my childhood." Her voice carried a reflective note, the kind people use when they're not just telling a story, but revisiting a place inside themselves. When I was little, the power would go out in our house every time it rained this hard. My mother would light candles, and we'd all sit together in one room. It felt safe, like nothing could touch us. I listened, not just to her words but to the pauses between them. She wasn't just talking about storms. She was reaching into memories, maybe even into longings. "Do you miss it?" I asked softly. Her eyes flickered toward me, thoughtful. "Sometimes. Life doesn't feel like that anymore. It's louder, faster, lonelier." She let out a quiet laugh, though it held little amusement. "Strange, isn't it? Surrounded by people every day, yet somehow lonelier than ever." I felt something inside me stir at her words. That quiet honesty, that small crack in the confident exterior she usually carried. It made her seem so human, so close. "You're not alone tonight," I said. My voice was calm, but inside, I felt the weight of the moment pressing in. Her eyes lingered on mine a little longer than before, and there was something unspoken there, gratitude, maybe, or something deeper she wasn't ready to name. She set her mug down on the table and tucked one leg beneath her, turning slightly toward me. The lamplight caught the lines of her face, gentle yet defined, the kind of beauty that carried both strength and softness. "Tell me about you," she said. "What do storms remind you of?" The question caught me off guard, but I answered honestly. "Of starting over. I moved here after everything in my life felt like it had been washed away. I guess storms remind me that sometimes destruction clears the way for something new." She was quiet for a moment, absorbing my words, and then a small, genuine smile spread across her lips. "That's beautiful," she whispered. And in the hush that followed, something shifted. The storm outside was no longer the center of attention. It was just background music to the quiet exchange unfolding between us. A connection forming, delicate but undeniable. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was two people sharing pieces of themselves in the glow of lamplight, while the storm gave them permission to linger just a little closer, just a little longer. The storm had not weakened. If anything, it seemed to deepen into the night, each rumble of thunder carrying through the walls like a reminder of the world beyond us. Yet here, inside, the air was quiet and intimate. The glow from the lamp softened the room, and I found myself more aware of every little detail. Her steady breathing, the curve of her fingers resting on the mug, the way she leaned slightly toward me, as though the space between us had shrunk without either of us noticing. I had placed a plate of biscuits between us earlier, an almost awkward attempt at hospitality, but it became an excuse for closeness. When she reached for one, her hand brushed against mine. It wasn't deliberate, at least not at first, but the contact lingered just a fraction longer than it needed to. Warm skin against mine, light yet enough to send a quiet jolt through me. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. I felt her fingers tremble faintly before she withdrew them, wrapping both hands around her mug as if seeking refuge. Her gaze dropped to the table, but not before I caught the faint curve of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Sorry," she murmured, though the word carried more warmth than apology. "There's nothing to be sorry for," I said softly, my voice lower than usual, almost as if speaking too loudly would break the spell. Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed with something unspoken, something that made the ticking of the clock sound louder, the rain feel heavier, the air between us warmer. She leaned back slightly, adjusting the sweater around her shoulders. Her eyes flickered toward me, then away, as though testing whether it was safe to hold my gaze. I wanted to reach across, to close the small distance, but something inside me whispered patience. The night was long. These moments needed space to breathe. "Funny," she said after a pause, her tone lighter, almost playful. "A storm outside, and here I am, finding comfort in the company of a neighbor I barely knew a week ago. Sometimes the right people show up at the right time," I answered. It was the truth. I didn't plan for this night, but it already felt like it would leave an imprint I wouldn't forget. Her laugh was soft, almost a sigh. Then, as if by instinct, her hand reached for another biscuit. This time, when her fingers brushed mine, they didn't pull away immediately. Instead, her touch lingered, gentle, deliberate. My pulse quickened, but I stayed still, allowing her to decide the pace. Finally, she looked at me, really looked, her eyes steady and unguarded. The faintest trace of vulnerability flickered there, but it was wrapped in something else too: trust. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't fireworks. But in that brief, wordless contact, I felt more than I could have explained aloud. A connection sparking to life, fragile yet undeniable. And though nothing was spoken, I knew we were both aware that something had shifted, quietly, irrevocably. The night stretched on, the storm still weaving its restless song outside. Yet inside, the air felt hushed, fragile, as if the house itself knew it was holding onto a secret. Our earlier touches still lingered in my mind, not just on my skin but deep within me, echoing like a memory replaying itself with every beat of my heart. She set her mug aside, her hands now empty, resting lightly on her lap. I noticed how her fingers twisted together, a small sign of nerves betraying the calm expression she carried. The sight of it softened something inside me. This woman, so composed in every setting I'd ever seen her, now seemed uncertain, as though balancing on the edge of something she wasn't sure she should step into. "I don't usually," she began, her voice quiet, almost fragile. Her eyes darted toward mine, then away. "I don't usually let people in like this." The words hung between us, simple yet weighted. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, careful not to push, careful to give her room. "You don't have to explain," I said gently. "I understand." But she shook her head, her hair falling slightly over her face as she did. "No, I want to explain. Because tonight feels different." She drew in a breath, steadying herself. "I've spent years being strong, being what everyone else needed me to be. And somehow, without meaning to, I forgot what it feels like to just be seen, for myself." Her voice trembled at the end, and it pierced me. I wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her that I did see her, but I held back, knowing she needed to let the words come first. "I thought I was fine," she continued, her eyes finally lifting to meet mine. "Until tonight. Until sitting here, realizing how much I've missed this. The warmth of someone listening, someone noticing." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening at the raw honesty in her words. My own voice felt heavy when I finally spoke. "I notice you," I said quietly, the truth slipping out without hesitation. "Even before tonight, I did. Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering in her expression. For a moment, silence pressed between us again, but it wasn't awkward. It was charged, alive. She drew in a shaky breath, and her hand shifted ever so slightly closer to mine on the cushion between us. The distance was barely an inch, but it felt like a mile we were about to cross. I let my hand rest there, open, waiting. Not reaching, not forcing, just offering. Her fingers hesitated, then brushed mine, so light, so tentative it almost didn't feel real. But then her hand settled fully against mine, her skin warm and trembling. In that moment, her confession wasn't just in her words. It was in the way she let her hand stay there, in the way her shoulders seemed to relax, as if laying down a burden. And though neither of us said it outright, I knew we had stepped into something tender, something that couldn't be undone. The storm outside was easing now, but inside, the air carried a different kind of heaviness. Her hand still rested against mine, warm and steady, but I could feel the hesitation in her touch. It was as though every second stretched longer, asking us to decide what this closeness really meant. Her eyes met mine again, softer this time, yet filled with questions she hadn't spoken aloud. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The only sound was the rain easing into a gentler rhythm against the glass. Finally, she whispered, "We shouldn't." The words trembled on her lips, but her fingers didn't move away from mine. I swallowed hard, sensing the storm wasn't just outside, it was inside her too. "I know," I answered quietly, "but sometimes the heart doesn't ask for permission." She closed her eyes at that, leaning back slightly, as though searching for steadiness. "You're younger," she said, her voice a mixture of firmness and vulnerability. "People would never understand. They'd think." She didn't finish, but the weight of her fear filled the silence between us. I leaned in, not to close the gap completely, but enough for her to hear the steadiness in my voice. "Let them think what they want. What matters is what we know here." I pressed my free hand against my chest, feeling the steady thump of my heartbeat. "And right now, I know I've never felt more certain of anything." Her breath caught, and she turned her face toward the window, blinking back something I couldn't quite name. Tears or restraint. "You don't understand what it costs to feel this way at my age," she whispered. "I've lived long enough to know love isn't just about moments like this. It's about what happens after." Her honesty pierced me, but instead of pulling back, I leaned into it. "Then let's not rush into the after," I said softly. "Let's just sit here, in this moment, while it's ours." Her hand tightened ever so slightly against mine, a subtle grip that spoke more than words. And yet, her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath, the sound of someone carrying the weight of choices too heavy to name. For a few long seconds, the world narrowed to just us, the closeness of our hands, the shared warmth, the storm that had brought us together and was now slowly fading away. But then she pulled her hand back, resting it on her lap, her fingers curling inward. The absence of her touch was immediate, like the sudden chill when a blanket slips off in the night. "I need time," she said softly, her voice breaking just a little. I nodded, though a quiet ache spread through me. "Then I'll wait," I replied, the words more a promise than anything else. And in that silence, we both knew the choice ahead was not simple. Love was no longer just a feeling between us. It had become a decision, a risk, a path neither of us had expected to find on a stormy night. By the time dawn crept across the sky, the storm had passed. The steady roar of rain had quieted into silence, broken only by the occasional drip from the eaves. The air inside the house carried that post-storm stillness, a fragile calm, as if the world itself was catching its breath. She had dozed off on the couch, the oversized sweater pulled tightly around her. The lamplight had gone dim, leaving only the pale glow of morning seeping through the curtains. I sat nearby, watching her sleep, struck by how peaceful she looked. For someone who carried herself with such strength, such certainty, there was a softness to her in that moment, a quiet vulnerability she rarely let anyone see. I moved carefully, not wanting to disturb her, but when I adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, her eyes fluttered open. She blinked, groggy at first, then smiled faintly when she realized where she was. "Did I fall asleep here?" she asked, her voice hushed, still heavy with sleep. "You did," I said softly. "The storm wore you out." She pushed herself up slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you stayed up all night?" I shrugged, offering a small smile. "Someone had to make sure the storm didn't steal the house." Her laugh was quiet, but it warmed the room more than the sunlight creeping in. She sat back, looking at me with eyes that seemed clearer now, as though the storm had washed something away inside her, too. "Last night," she began, hesitating. Her gaze dropped to her hands folded in her lap. "I said things I don't usually say, things I don't usually let myself feel." I leaned forward, my voice steady, gentle. "And you don't have to take any of them back." Her eyes lifted to meet mine, and for a long moment we just looked at each other. There was no rush, no storm pushing us together, just the quiet morning and the weight of everything we had shared. "I'm scared," she admitted finally. The words trembled in the air, raw and honest. "Scared of what this could mean. Scared of what people would think. Scared of wanting something I thought I'd already missed my chance at." I reached out, slowly, giving her the chance to pull away if she needed to. But she didn't. Her hand slipped into mine, warm and familiar now, as if it belonged there. "Then let's just start small," I said softly. "Not with promises, not with fears. Just with today. Just with us, sitting here, holding hands, and knowing last night meant something real." She breathed out, the tension in her shoulders easing as she leaned closer, resting lightly against me. Her head found its place on my shoulder, her hair brushing my cheek, and I felt the quiet rhythm of her breathing settle into mine. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting soft light across the room. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't the storm that had changed everything. It was the calm after, the choice to stay, the decision to begin something new, however uncertain. For the first time, it felt like the world wasn't waiting for us to decide. It was simply letting us be, together, in the gentle light of morning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who believes in unexpected love. And if you want more heartfelt age gap romance stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. The rain was relentless, pounding against the windows when the knock came. Opening the door, warmth met with trembling hands and eyes that carried more than just the storm outside. The hours passed in conversation, laughter softening into silence, and then a touch. Fingers brushed, lingering just long enough to change the air between us. A confession hovered on trembling lips, but the words never fully came. What happened after that moment? I can't reveal here. Watch the full story, link in description.